Now the time has come for us to actually start doing the sequence itself and getting some animation for our static objects. So we've got the sequence over here, which is the same sequence that we created, and we're going to set up a timeline and how big we want it to be. Now bear in mind, we're running at 24 FPS, so for example, 240 frames will be about 10 seconds. So depending on how big we want the animation, we're probably going to set that to 480. And for you to do this very quickly, you go up in here into the settings, and you've got the start at 0, and then you got the end at 480. So now we're going to have a timeline that's 480 frames long, and we can actually expand this camera cut to cover all of that time in there like that. Okay. Now, why did I extend the camera cut over the bounds of the frame? Is because whenever we start the render at frame 0 and we end it, if the camera cut starts and ends right there, we're gonna get some visual artifacting at the beginning and end of the sequence. So by doing this, we ensure that doesn't happen. We're sort of going above the limit. Okay, now we've got our camera here, and we can now move it in the scene. So let's say we want to put the camera in a position where we want to start our animation. Now, if we look back to the Dark Souls sort of video, the camera already starts here, and it sort of like pulls back as the sequence sort of plays, and then we see it from here. We potentially we could have a second camera that has this shot, and then this shot. I think starting it from here is not going to be that interesting. So instead, we could do something else. I was thinking we actually take the camera all the way up here, above these sort of columns like that. Okay, and then we could come down, work out a sort of an animation. So let me just try and, yeah, something like that, and then we can see the sort of the effect down there. We can sort of start from here. So we need to key this position of the camera. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in right here on the sequence, and then I'm going to position my cursor sort of thing of the timeline over around here. And where we see the transform, we've got this button and these arrows in this button. We're going to press this button, which has now added the key right there, okay? And if we expand on that, we can see that it's a location, rotation, and scale key. Now, we don't actually need the scale, so we could select and delete that. But the location and rotation is very important. Now, if we press this button up here, this will mean that any movement that we do to this camera of any kind, rotation or location, it will put a key wherever this key cursor is. So if we press that button now, and let's say we take it to roughly 2 seconds, so 2 seconds have passed. In 2 seconds, what do we want it to do? Well, we could probably press Q and while holding the right click mouse button to go down like that. And now you see it's added 2 new keys and it's created a timeline for that. If you go up here, press space, you can see what happens. So in 2 seconds, we get that. Now, one thing about this, and it's found in a tutorial about animations in my previous tutorial that's on YouTube. This is not a linear sort of movement of camera. This is actually a curved one, and it's smoothed out. So what this means is that it actually starts slow, reaches a peak point at the middle of the timeline of this timeline, and then slows down all the way to 0. You can see that once we play, it sort of slows down. You see that right at the end, it sort of slows down. It smooths out. Now, if you want to change that, you want to select all of these and right click. You can change them from cubic to linear. And this is now represented by these triangles here. Now, if we press play, the sequence pretty much ends abruptly, the way, as in the speed of the camera will happen equally. But let's not do that. Let's just keep it smooth. And again, this is what we've got so far. Okay, so then at that point, once we reach this, what do we want to do in the next sort of, I don't know, all the way up to 120 frames? So at this point, we could sort of further go down and get closer, sort of the camera level right here, or something like that, something like that. And then even further, we could be closer to the camera like that. Just to look at it, basically. And then if we play the animation again, we can see what's sort of going on. We reach this point and then we move closer to it. Now, these sort of movements of the camera may be cinematic or not. It's really, I mean, this is where we got to improve our movement. And then what I'm thinking, if we continue going, I would like for the camera to sort of go around the skull and then look, you know, from behind the skull, look forward in the distance. And if we play this animation, you'll notice that we're kind of, it's not really good, is it? Because we're kind of like going through it. So what you're going to have to do, because we blocked out the animation where we want to start and where we want to end. So when we reach sort of like this point, for example, here, we could say, well, actually, I don't want my camera to be here. And by the way, I can see that this glitch still exists. Whenever I try the X, Y, and Z locations from within the timeline, and actually, instead of moving the camera, it's actually rotating it. And I don't know what, this is a thing in 5.3. It's not a thing in 5.1 or 2 of Unreal Engine. So I think they're going to fix it. But anyway, we're just going to manually have to move. So we're going to do this, you know. So now instead of it going like what it did earlier, it's now going to sort of like take a bit of a detour. And then here, I'm going to pull back again. So you can see we're taking a bit of a detour and then going like that. Now, because the movement keeps changing, we're getting a bit of an abruption here. So in order to balance that out, we're going to have to look and see, sorry, let me just Control Z. We're going to have to select these and maybe push them further down the line like that. So let's see if we get a smoother, yeah, okay. So it's still not very smooth. What we could do, we could take this and make sure that we're actually pushing them further like that. So then we do get smoother and like that. It's not great. It's not perfect. We're probably going to refine this, but let's just see. I mean, this is the first block out that we've done for this particular shot. When we reach this point, we'll probably want to switch to a new camera angle. But until we do that, let's just look at other things about our shot. So the first thing is that nothing is in focus right now because we're very far away. So it's really up to you whether or not that's a effect that you want to go for. I'm going to change a few things though. So the first thing, with the camera selected, I'm going to go over to my, you know, this sort of manual, the focus distance. And I'm going to press this button here, which means as a keyframe for this project. So now a keyframe has actually been added in here. And you can see it is this one, manual focus settings. And it's got a value of whatever this value is right now at this point. So if I set that to, you know, like 10,000, maybe that's not going to be useful. But we could always enable our focus. So sorry, our focus plane. I'm just trying to find the setting. So focus setting, draw plane. And I could play around with the setting just to see where the focus plane is. And just ensure that it's sort of hitting that point there, right? That's what we've got now. This is what we set up as a timeline. And then as we get further down here, here is where it doesn't really matter where the focus is, but you could animate it so that as you go down, the focus plane comes closer to you, like that. Something like that. And the reason we're doing this is because if you look, now we've got it in blur. So if we go back, it starts very clear. We can see what's going on. As we go down, it sort of goes into blur mode. And then by the time we've reached this other point here, I'm going to not do any keynotes yet. I'm just going to have a look. We're going down. So at this point right here, I might want to reduce that even further to mask whatever is in front. And then as we come down, okay, around here, this is when we start recovering our focus. So we could push this down. And maybe the focus is again around that point. So let's just have a look. Actually, we need to remove the this plane before we do it. So see, go down, and then the focus comes back. And as we get a bit closer here, let's have a look at our focus. It's moved along with the camera, so we've got to make sure that it's in here. By the way, there is a simpler way of doing this by just simply changing from manual to tracking. But if you do that, then you're always going to have everything in focus all the way to the point of the goblet. So you're going to have no real control. It's going to be more of an automated process. And we go down like that. And when we reach this point, we do want this manual focus to come back over here. And then as we approach, let's just take this down. Again, bring the focus into the goblet because that's what we want to see. That's our hero asset. And then as we get closer to here, same thing. So we're kind of blocking out the focus. And then when we reach this point, I still want the focus to be on the goblet. But then when we reach sort of like this point here, so I'm going to keep the focus on the goblet by just pressing this button again here to add another key. And then when we get here, I would like the focus to go past the goblet to about that point. The goblet now goes into out of focus, and we're seeing something in the distance. And a lot of this stuff, by the way, you will need to change because, you know, depending on what the effect looks like, you know, you're probably going to have to make some adjustments. Now, another thing in here, once we did this animation, you can see that we got the smoke coming out, but in the cinematic from Dark Souls, the only time the smoke comes out is when the sort of character or whatever gets close to it. So what we want to do now is we do want to control the smoke 01, we want to control it on the sequence. Let me just expand the sequence above a bit. And now I'm going to drag and drop this smoke right in here. And if I want this smoke to not start at all until this point, I could just go and press this button, select Niagara component in here, and then press this plus button and select Niagara system lifecycle track. And now, let's have a look at our sequence. I'm just going to take it away. And by the way, if you want the sequence, if you want to have like a track for the sequence here, you can always go up here, press this button, sorry, not that one, here, and select cinematic viewport. And now you're going to have that. Just make sure in the sequence you are possessing the camera again. So now you can control the sequence from here as well. Okay, so let's press play. You can see the smoke is no longer playing. You see that? There's no smoke, nothing. And then we get closer to it, there's still no smoke, nothing like that. And now, all of a sudden, there's smoke. Because that's when, in the sequence, we started. And it will only last until it reaches this point. So this can be extended. As you see, it just killed it. But this could be extended. You could still have smoke coming out here, if you'd like. If that's something that you want to do. And it's the same thing for smoke 2. We can add smoke 2 in here as well. Let's go at the start of this. Let's just say both the smokes. Actually, let's say this one is a bit more delayed. So we go in here, Niagara component, and we do a live track. And we increase the live track to about here. So if we go back into the sequence a bit, and we press play, you can see the smoke starting. Nice. And then from behind, we should see the other smoke building up. Unfortunately, I mean, you can see it over there, but unfortunately, not enough. It's not happened fast enough. So in order for us to really see that, we would need to play around in here and maybe bring this a bit like that in order to properly see it, because it's just not enough time has passed for it to go, for the effect to form behind us. So yeah, it is a bit of a, you got to balance it. You got to find the right balance for this sort of stuff. And it's going to be, timing is going to be critical, like in anything. And imagine this in movies, in an actual movie set, how many things actually have to happen at the same time. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. So we've got a nice sort of sequence set up for this. And what we can do now is have a look at doing a second camera and extend this animation even further.